So many of you guys have your first daily penalty game player. Unfortunately myself, I'm a couple days behind because I keep missing penalties. Today we're going to take a look at all these players. I'll give my thoughts to them, training guides to get the best out of the players, what skills to add on, and then for David Beckham and Tony Adams, if you can put booster items onto them to get even more out of the cards. The first player we're going to look at is Mohamed Salah. I think this guy looks very good, and the reason for that is I have a pretty much identical version on my free-to-play account, and he's very strong. It's pretty much identical stats. So I know from using that card that this one's going to be good as well. So if we look at the builds, I have two builds I'd recommend, and they are quite similar. If we take the boost off for a second, you see we're getting 85 plus on all dribbling stats for +3, 87 finishing to get the +3 to 90, and then he's got good speed, acceleration, balance, and even stamina. So if we put the boost back on, you can see we're getting 90s in pretty much all the key areas except for tight possession, and unfortunately kicking power is quite low. I wouldn't really be worried about that though, because Salah has kind of custom animations for finesse shots, so you should be hitting finesse shots as much or more often with this Salah, especially when he's cutting inside. You're going to go bottom left. Kick and power does help with those finesse shots, but it's not going to need to be as high as like 90 or something for a normal power shot. So you notice with the build I do have 2 points left over. The reason for that is if I put the point into finishing, 91 finishing is going to be an improvement on 90. You're not going to notice that. You can put it into passing, you might get a little boost. But you could also put it into physical contact. It's not going to look too much different, 66 to 68. But if he's on an up arrow, that'll take it to 70. And one thing I've noticed with the new update is if you have 70 physical contact, your player starts holding off defenders a lot more. It doesn't even matter if the defender has 90 physical contact himself. As long as your player with the ball has 70, you will, put an effort in and try to hold them off. The next build I have is pretty much very similar. If we put the boost on, you can see it's pretty much identical. It's just we put one more point into dribbling and then that leftover point into passing. We took off one dexterity as well, but the reason for this is we're working on the assumption you're going to get a form boost, and that'll take the tight possession to 90 and the balance to 90 as well. So just to compare the card again, this one's more working on the assumption that you don't have a form boost. Obviously we are relying on it for the physical contact, but it's a small part of the card. And this next one is pretty much you're only going to use him if he has an up arrow. If we look at the skills for Salah, he's got nice skills. So what I'd recommend putting on him is the first one is, and it has to go on him, is acrobatic finishing. Your opponent knows you want to cut inside the Salah and shoot, so you might need to kind of put a bit more pace in your dribble and get free of the defender. You might be slightly off balance, so definitely put acrobatic finishing on for that. Then I'd go for first time shot, just helps with meta shots. He won't be a player you score many meta shots with, but if he does drift into the middle a little bit and you cut it across from the left wing into the middle, he'll be able to shoot that meta first time shot across goal, or rather near post, sorry. Then I'd go for true passing. Again, he's not going to be true passing too often. Ideally he's the player on the end of the true pass, but it will just give consistency in the scenarios where he is true passing. And then you can go for soul control and flip flap together. He already has double touch, you'll get the ball roll. I'd recommend that. That's what I'm going to go for if I get this card. But actually I have Mohamed Salah Blitzcurler, so on this account I won't be doing it, but on my other account. But if you don't use double touch too often, because I know there's a lot of people that don't, you can go for fighting spirit. It'll just help him. He does have good stamina, so you don't have to sub him off with fighting spirit, and also help him under pressure from the defenders, because if defenders are near your player, it kind of impacts their ability to dribble and shoot. Fighting spirit minimizes that negative impact. But if you don't go for soul control and flip flap and you go for fighting spirit, you will have a skill slot free. Then I'd go for either. You could go one touch pass. I don't think it's necessary. I've talked about how 1-2 passes are kind of like magnets anyway, so you don't need it. You could consider it. Instead, I would go for pinpoint crossing, just because, like I said earlier, with acrobatic finishing, your opponent knows you want to cut in and shoot. If your opponent is defending that very strongly, you might want to go outside and hit a cross in just to kind of get him to stop covering the cut inside. He needs to worry about the byline too. Next player we'll take a look at is Cole Palmer. So this guy's like very hyped in real life. The problem is his cards usually don't have a lot of skills. This one has a few more though, so we don't have the 10 skills yet. Maybe eFootball 25 will get the 10. If we take a look at his builds, this is what I went for. This is without the boost, so you can see we're getting 85s in all the dribbling, 85 finishing, acceleration. So it's a pretty good card. Unfortunately, you can't get him to the 85 kick and power as well with this build. If you wanted to do that, you would have to sacrifice probably passing and even a little bit of either dexterity or shooting, but then you're going below 85s on them, so I just wouldn't bother. I don't think it's worth your points. So here he is with the boosts. One thing I always talk about when I'm building strikers is you want 90 finishing or 95. There's kind of two thresholds I've noticed. 90 finishing is like a good baseline, and then 95 is just if you want that extra security. For attacking midfielders, I always recommend 88 is the the finishing you'd want. Now, it's not because 88 finishing performs better on an attacking midfielder than a striker for some random reason. It's just for the fact that with your attacking midfielder, you don't need as consistent shooting, and kind of similar, you're relying on the form. If you go to 88, half the time he'll get pushed up to 90, and then you'll get to 90 finishing. So it just gives you more freedom when you're building your attacking midfielders to take a little bit of points off the finishing and put it elsewhere, and then the form will take you half the games up to that 90 threshold. And then 88 finishing anyway is going to be very strong regardless, so it's not a major like downgrade from 90. So for the skills I'd recommend on Palmer, I would go for acrobatic finishing, similar to what we were saying about Salah, double touch, outside curler because he only has medium weak foot accuracy. You could also go for Marseille turn / scissors feint. I would probably go for scissors feint just because of how tall he is. His long legs will help. And then you can go for flip flap as well because he has soul control. You put double touch on, you get the ball roll. But again, if you don't want to go for that, go for weighted pass. It'll help with his true balls. Put a bit of backspin on the ball. He'll weight it perfectly. Well, maybe not perfectly with his pass stats, but it will help the weight on the passes. If he was a whole player, this is just not related to this card, but just kind of a tip. If he was a whole player, I wouldn't recommend weighted pass. The reason for that is because he's a whole player, he would have been, or if he was a whole player, he'd be running in behind more, closer to the box. He wouldn't have space to make use of weighted pass. But because he's a creative playmaker, he'll be a bit deeper at times. He'll have the space to make use of that skill. So obviously it doesn't really matter to this card because he's not a whole player, but just something to keep in mind if you're building a whole player card as well. Alright, next we'll look at Oblak. We won't spend too long on the goalkeeper. This is the build I went for, and it's literally just try get goalkeeper awareness, reflexes and reach up to 90 with a boost, and then we're lucky to get also able to get parry into 85 for +3. So again, not too much into it, but that's what I would do. I don't think this guy will be amazing, but if you're new to the game, he might be a decent keeper. And then next we're going to look at Carvajal. I don't think this guy is interesting either. His defensive stats are too low. He's not the fastest anyway. If he was this level of pace with really good defensive stats, he'd be useful. I'm sure he's not terrible in game. I'm sure he's got good player ID just because he's like a Real Madrid player, but that's what I would recommend on him. If you want to know about the skills I'd put on Carvajal, unfortunately he doesn't start with a lot, so I wouldn't recommend putting skills in this guy, but really quickly I would go for blocker, aerial superiority, interception, true passing and man marking. So next we're going to go to the player that I think most people are interested in, and it's David Beckham, and I have 4 builds for this guy. I think, yeah, it is 4. I just checked. So the first one here, we don't put any points in the passing, and the reason for that is I feel 88 low pass is as high as you need to go, and I talk about it in my how to train midfielders video. It's just a theory that, well, it's not really a theory, that the Japanese players have tested it, and I kind of trust their opinion on a lot of things. True passing gives a 20% boost to the low pass stat, and then if you go to 85 you'll get over 100. So that's why I don't put any points in the passing. I do have a build with passing though, if you just don't want to, if you're not confident in that belief, so just to kind of accommodate for that, but I wouldn't go above 88 low pass. But you might still want to put points in the passing just because the lofted pass doesn't follow that same theory. So this is an attacking build. We didn't really put much points into defending. We did get the tackling to 70 though, just because it was only 2 points worth and it was a nice little baseline. With the physical contact we also got that to 70, and we made the lower body strength quite high for 2 reasons. One, kick and power. If you get a shot with him, you'd want that kick and power. Even the knock-on finesse takes into account kick and power quite strongly actually. So his knock-on finesse will be very good with 95 kick and power, 101 curl. 80 finishing is a bit low, but he has got these 2 stats to compensate. And also, he's David Beckham. He's going to have his own animation. So the knock-on finesse, and this guy's going to be really good. I'd recommend playing him as a left centre mid. His dribbling's okay. Not great stats. His ball control is quite good, but the other 2 are kind of mid-level. But we did give him a bit of balance to 80. So I think Konami have kind of made him a bit usable with the balance there. On to the next build. So this is the build I would recommend if you put passing on. The main differences are obviously the passing. We got 100 lofted pass. I don't know if you'll notice that, to be honest. I've used a player with 100 lofted pass before and never, like, I was Trent Alexander-Arnold. I never really noticed it too much. I think 95 or above is kind of the peak, but it's just in case you want to try it out. We did manage to keep the dexterity to 70, but we made him a bit slower and we made defensive stats higher. I wouldn't recommend this build just because you did put points into defending stats, but you took points off the speed, and I do think speed is very important for defending in midfield just because you can cover ground more. It doesn't matter if your defensive stats are really high if your player's not even near the ball. So if you can manually move your player into position, you can get away with lower defensive stats. So the next build has the higher defensive stats. We still have the speed on 79, but you're relying on the form. He will be on B form permanently because he's a legend. If you want to know for the booster, this is what I recommend on the booster. I went on agility booster just because agility. We put a lot of points into lower body strength and dexterity, you see. So we're going to take off points from there, get more points back. This is like an attacking build as well, but you can also make it into a defensive version like so. So for the skills, what I'd recommend is, if he's playing centre mid, which he should be, he's going to need interception and one touch pass. Necessary skills for midfielders, or all centre mids, are interception, one touch pass, and true pass. Again, I talk about that in my How to Train Midfielders video, so he needs them absolutely. Then I would go for soul control for that crazy knock-on finesse you're going to be able to do with the long-range curler he already has, and just the player ID of David Beckham. I would go for first time shot as well, just because he's an orchestrator, so he won't be in the box as much, but he will be on the edge of the box for that cutback. So again, he'll be very good at that with the long range shooting and the kicking power that he has. And after that, you can go for cut behind and turn and double touch. I would probably go for cut behind and turn, because I don't think with David Beckham's stats his double touch ability is going to be good. He's not as fast. I'd be worried that if you try to do a double touch, you'd get caught up pretty quickly, whereas a cut behind and turn is pretty hard to catch up if you do it, time it correctly, and it suits players that are a bit more static, like a David Beckham, or this version of David Beckham is anyway. And then next we're going to look at Tony Adams, who I'm the most interested in this pack. I think he is very similar to Van Boyten, but fixes all the issues. Well, not all of them, there is one issue he doesn't fix, but he does fix a lot of the issues with Van Boyten. So if we look at his builds, I have two builds, one with a bit of passing ability and one that's purely defensive focus. So I'd recommend the passing build, because this guy has low lofted pass. We'll look at the skills in a minute, but he does have low lofted pass, and that's very strong on centre backs. So if we go on the boosts, you can see that we're getting low pass and lofted pass just below 80, so you're relying on the form, but we'll fix that with the booster crafting update, or upgrade, sorry. Got very good jumping, and he's 191 centimeters tall, very physical contact, good speed and good acceleration for a man of this height. You might be curious, why did we go for 84 defensive engagement instead of getting 85 for the +3? It's just because, for two reasons really. Centre backs don't really need defensive engagement as much, because one, they're not out of stamina as much, and two, they're already in position, so they don't need to track back as often. And he actually already has quite good stamina for a centre back. I think 80 stamina or above, you won't really have to substitute off your centre backs. I have a Guardiola with lower stamina now at the moment I'm using, and I do often have to sub him off for like a Tomiyasu late into the game. But I think Tony Adams with this stamina will be fine. If you want the pure defensive build, here it is. So you do get the defensive engagement to 85 now. I don't think it's going to be a major improvement for that stat, but the awareness, tackling and aggression will be a little bit higher. And also, compared to the previous build, this new one is a little bit faster, so he will be a little bit better defensively. If we go to what booster item to put onto him, I've put passing on just so we don't have to rely on the form for the boost, and it is the passing kind of build. But with this build, you can also take off a little bit of the passing. You can take off the 1 speed, 81 to 80, not going to be a difference. And then, what was it, the extra dexterity as well, take off 1 dexterity and get the engagement up to 88. I wouldn't recommend it, but I know some people don't really care about the on-the-ball ability as much with their centre-backs, because for me it's very important. I only use centre-backs I'm comfortable with. It's why I don't like Van Boyten, because on the ball he's not good, but this Tony Adams kind of very similar to Van Boyten, but rectifies some of the issues of his on the ball ability. And then for the skills, what I'd recommend is definitely put 1 touch pass on. Even though this guy is better on the ball than Van Boyten, he still is going to be a bit dodgy, so you need to put 1 touch pass on, just so if you're under pressure you can pass it straight away. Then I would go for true passing, just to help him, spread it out to the fullbacks. Weighted pass would be good too, in case you want to play a lofted true ball into your wingers if they're free. Then the other skills, I'm thinking gamesmanship, just again, if he has the ball under pressure, there's no passing option. If he's under pressure, he might fall over, get a foul. You could go for soul control as well, do a knock-on low lofted pass. It's a favourite of mine to switch the ball if he's on the right centre-back position. Do a knock-on out to the right, and then ping a diagonal ball up to like your left wing forward, especially if it's someone like Leo or even a Hulla out wide, and they'll win the ball pretty much every time. And then I don't really do this as much anymore, but I used to do it when I played 3-back, and it was pinpoint crossing. You can play a low drilled ball into the striker with pinpoint crossing. I think the issue though with this guy is, if you're playing this guy in a 3-back, you should probably play him in the middle. I think you'll be too kind of not nimble enough to play him out wide. You might get exposed. But I don't think that pinpoint crossing is gonna be implemented as much. So if you don't want to go for pinpoint crossing for that low driven cross into the striker's feet, you could just go for a cut behind and turn or something like that. So overall, my thoughts, I think Salah and Adams would be very good cards, very usable. I think David Beckham and Palmer are maybe not as usable, but just kind of more sentimental value. And then Oblak and Carvajal, I think they're just useless. I don't know why they're in the pack. I guess they throw in a useless player. They had Koval last season. I mean, he was actually alright in goal, that Koval, apparently, some people were telling me. So I'm sure Oblak isn't going to be terrible, especially if you're a new person, but if you're already playing the game for a few months, you should have a better goalkeeper than that, and I don't think there's any use for Carvajal unless you're a Real Madrid fan and you want to do a past and present team.